Thanks for tuning into the 6-3 podcast. I am your host, Joel, with my co-host, Ben. Michigan won against Penn State in amazing, surprising fashion. I figured actually it was going to be a grind. I think a lot of people figured it'd be a grind game, but they wore them down after like just the first half. They had like 50 snaps alone in the first half.
Yep.
Outside of two ridiculous plays by Penn State, one of the best play actions of the year, honestly, by Sean Clifford, and then the pick six, the fumble or pick six was that? I'm trying to remember how it went, but
pick six.
Yeah, pick six.
Bounced off,
and it was a lucky bounce pick six. It was
right.
bounce. In.
Yep. Right.
JJ McCarthy looked pretty slow on that rundown, though.
He did. I don't think he knew it was picked off until like halfway, and he's like, "Oh."
And then he was already like, he looked gassed.
Yeah. He's like, "Oh, well, that stinks."
But I mean, he ran the ball really well, so that was exciting to see him use his wheels a little bit more in that game. Because I think coming down to the wire against these better teams, Illinois now looking like a trap game at the end of the year before Ohio State, and then having to play Ohio State, those wheels are going to need to come in handy, I think. So start priming them now.
I think it just opens up so much. I mean, if you rewatch the two long touchdown runs that Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards had, the defense was paying a lot of attention to JJ McCarthy on those runs, and it basically just blocks a defender by himself, takes him completely out of the play. So it opens up a ton. Just you don't need to run him 25 times. You just need to run him 5 to 10 times. Just show it enough, and then he needs to be able to take first downs. On passing plays that are there, which he did this game for the most part. I mean, there's a couple other times where I'm like, dude, just run, but. Overall, I don't really have that many complaints about his game. I mean, you don't like the pick six, but it was weird. It was a weird play. And then he missed on the first drive. I think if he hits Donovan Edwards on the third down by the goal line, that's probably a touchdown. Other than that, I mean, he wasn't really asked to do a whole lot.
Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards took care of all. The defense really stepped up.
Yeah. Was as dominating, just a paving, dominating physical performance as you're going to see. I mean, you don't run for 400 yards. Like some people are like
against a top 5 run defense,
right? And you can talk about how they may have been overrated. They hadn't played anybody that could really run the ball like obviously like Michigan all year, but that's still unless you're a triple option team. You don't see them running you don't even see them running for 400 yards. You run for 300 yards. That's like, wow, we dominated them up front. You ran for over 400. Like that is extremely difficult to do. And they were probably, one trip up of CJ Stokes from running for like 470.
CJ finished the job too with 4 carries, 23 yards.
Yeah, he was gone if he doesn't get tripped up on one of those carries at the end. So, overall, just a completely dominating performance. I have absolutely no complaints. You hope, and now you go into a bye week, where part of me is like, man, I kind of wish they didn't have a bye week.
Yeah, keep the momentum rolling, right?
Right, but they do have some guys that they could get healthy. I'm sure everybody's got bumps and bruises. That would be good to get some things cleaned up. Like Jamon Green clearly has a bum shoulder right now. I'm sure JJ's a little banged up. I'm sure, if you can get Cade McNamara back, then you feel a lot better about maybe the backup quarterback situation.
Feel better that JJ McCarthy can go for a couple more runs.
Yeah, you just feel a little bit better about the overall quarterback room at that point. Maybe Nikhai Hill-Green, you can get him back. Doesn't sound like they're going to get Eric All back, but there's some guys that just need to get healthy.
Is Jaden McBrose planning to come back this year?
He dressed for the first time last week.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So he was out there dressed. He did not play. So we'll see.
And he'll be a depth guy for the most part anyway this year if he does play.
This year, yeah, especially with the emergence of Jamon Green playing really well, DJ Turner, obviously, Will Johnson, but that's huge. Like
Mike Sanders still. Yeah, I mean, they've got
McBrose was coming along last year until he got hurt, and that would be a big step in the right direction with him. Maybe you can get some of the young guys some more time in practice too, and kind of work them in. Maybe Jimmy Rolled or Quentin Johnson played a lot at safety this past week.
Grant's been doing good. Mason Graham.
Yeah. So I think it's all good. You can't really complain. And we'll talk about Michigan State a little bit, probably next week, probably a little bit more, just because it is the 2-week period. Both teams have a bye week, which is just weird. Doesn't really happen very often. But it's setting up for a undefeated showdown in Columbus again. It's going to come down.
This game really made me feel like, hey, we have a spark of hope against Ohio State this year. Just the way the offensive line took control. Like you watch all the I like watching the referee cams on the replays and just seeing the offensive line, just each one of those guys just take a guy out.
Right.
Just to completely eliminate their man in front. And,
yeah, I think they're better up front than they were last year. There might have been so I think they would be probably better suited to have like an Andrew Stuber at right tackle this year, right? So I don't know if they're better at like maybe that position than they were.
That's the only one. I mean, but Trente Jones is a run blocker. Solid.
Yeah, but Trente Jones and Carson Barnhart is pretty good in pass protection. He's just isn't what, and he was great in everything this week. Oluwatimi is a massive improvement from Vasardis, and Vasardis was good. But Oluwatimi's better. Zinter and Keegan was incredible this game. Zinter's been moving people. Ryan Hayes was really good this game. He's just gotten better. So this is a better offensive line than was last year, and they were considered the best in the country last year. So now you got two backs that can hit the home run. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes Joel Klatt keeps saying, and because he's done 4 Michigan games in a row, so I won't.
Joel Klatt knows this Michigan team by now.
I'm not gonna really complain. They're the best combo that there is out there. He and Gus. So, but he keeps saying, "Hey, when is the game that JJ McCarthy needs to go out there and win?" And he's probably right. There are going to be times when he has to go out there. But Indiana was kind of that game. I mean, we couldn't run the ball that well, and they put it in his hands in the second half, and he won it for the most part. I know
it's back after the interception.
Right. I know it's against Indiana, but they definitely put it in his hands to go win it. But I'm not sure with this offensive line if there's going to be much of a game where he has to be, he doesn't need to go out there and be Caleb Williams. He didn't have to go out there and be Bryce Young or Hendon Hooker or, do that type of thing. One, we just don't run that type of offense. And two, I don't know if that's necessary right now, right? I'm not sure that's at all needs to happen. Now, maybe against Ohio State, right? That would probably be the game, right? And then there might be some times where he just whatever, depending on what the defense is doing, or what type of defense they're playing against, like a Michigan State, maybe he does put up bigger numbers, but I'm not sure they're gonna get into too many positions this year where they can't lean on the offensive line in the running game. I mean, last year they didn't really run into that at all until Georgia, right? And that Georgia defense was on another
elite
level.
Yeah.
Just was basically an NFL team. So I'm not sure they're going to run into a whole lot of problems up until maybe the last few games, right? And that's kind of where you test your preparation for the whole year and see how far he's come, right? And I'm not really seeing it. I'm not going to sit here and predict that they can win in Columbus, but I agree with you. This was a step where it's okay, we might have as good of a offensive line or have as potent of a running game as last year that we're gonna pose some problems for those guys. Even though they've looked really good, Ohio State has looked really good. So I don't know. I got no complaints this week. No, none.
It's hard to find anything. You can't. Because even that interception by JJ was a fluke interception.
Mostly fluke. Yeah, he missed a couple of those quick screens.
And obviously you talked about missing Donovan Edwards early on. He's got to get his touch back a little bit.
Yeah, you would have liked it. You would have liked
Matt talked about the injury possibly messing up with his touch, so he's just got to get that back.
Yeah, and maybe a week off. I think a week off will do him good too, of just getting back into fundamentally sound football with him too. Another thing is I don't know, the more they use him in the running game, I just talked about, the better they're going to be overall. The red zone offense, I guess, could have been, or especially at least in the first half, could have been better. Obviously, it could have been better. This game wasn't even as close as the final score. I mean, this game could have been 56-3. I mean, it was pretty brutally bad by Penn State. Can we just get over James Franklin? I think he's a fraud. Can I say that?
Like 3 years ago on a podcast, though, at some point, we probably said, James Franklin's a top 5 Big Ten coach.
Yeah, he might still be. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of good coaches in the Big Ten now. Although
yeah,
we're
seeing what's his face, Wisconsin.
Brett Chris got fired, so
Brett Bielema.
Yeah, Bielema he's probably the Big Ten Coach of the Year right now, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. I still think Greg Schiano's a good coach. The crap he gets from Rutgers every year.
Yeah, he's just a terrible team. I mean,
yeah, it's hard to do anything with that.
Fleck's a good coach.
I thought, Pat Fitzgerald, I thought was good for a while too, but now they've had a rough year.
I mean, at some point you got to move on. I mean, they won't ever move on from him just because of
like they haven't moved on from Kurt Ferentz. I mean,
yeah, and they played there. He played there, and he's won them.
Loxley's pretty good.
Yeah, there's some good coaches in the Big Ten. And I think overall, I would say the Big Ten is kind
Jeff Brom. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, my Purdue pick is starting to look better. I'm just saying.
Yeah, they've figured it out.
I know everybody was like crapping on them because they lost to Syracuse. Syracuse is undefeated, so that's not that bad of a loss.
We both picked NC State in the last pick 6, so we didn't know Devin Leary was going to have a 20 pick.
I did not know that. I wouldn't have picked them.
I would. Yeah, same here. We both would have changed.
He's easily their best player, but yeah. Overall, I mean, the Big Ten I think is kind of on the up for the most part. There's still some stinky, terrible teams. I mean, Nebraska is not very good.
But they've always been a name, so I feel like they're not going to be down forever.
Well, and they've got some good players. They've got some excellent players. I just think Scott Frost didn't work. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it didn't work, right? So they're bad. I mean, Michigan State's pretty bad.
Mel Tucker's not coming.
No. And Wisconsin's pretty bad this year, which is incredible. And Iowa's pretty bad. So some of the teams that like you're used to seeing,
Wisconsin was due to be bad at some point here.
You would think. I mean, with literally not.
I think it was kind of Bush League to fire Christ, but
I just don't see my whole thing with that one is I just don't see the point. Like, I get what they're doing. Like, okay, they feel like they've got a guy who could be their head coach in Jim Leonard, so they're giving him like a trial run type thing. And what they don't want to happen is if they keep Christ and then fire him after the year, and then Leonard just says, "All right, I'm out of here," and goes somewhere else to be a head coach or be a coordinator in the NFL or something. So I get what they're doing, but they also, I'm pretty sure Kansas's head coach Leopold is from Wisconsin. Yeah, he coached at Wisconsin Whitewater. So I think they're trying to get ahead of that sweepstakes too if they don't think Leonard's a guy. So I get what they're doing, but I mean, come on.
This has been good enough for a long time. It's like
very, very good. Like he's got like the same record as Jim Harbaugh now in a much easier division. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, if Harbaugh in Michigan were in the West, Harbaugh might have like 7 losses. So
yeah,
but it's looking like the Big Two and little, it was before. It was always the Big Two, Little 8, the Big Ten with Michigan and Ohio State, and it's kind of trending that way again right now. I know every team poses problems, to Michigan and to Ohio State. Some teams give Ohio State issues too, no doubt. But man, I mean, from just a pure talent standpoint and just physically, they're just better than, far and away, in my opinion, better than any of the other teams. And it's evident when you see, okay, Penn State, who was pretty clearly the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, at least to this point. Illinois might have an argument now. Get manhandled on the field. Like, they didn't even look like they belonged. It would look like ice cream. It was pretty bad. Like, I mean, the fact that it was a 2-point game at halftime was I mean, they kept saying it at halftime. They're like, I'm not sure I've ever seen a game that so, much of a mismatch or that so, tilted in one direction and yet be only a 2-point game. So it was going to come, water was going to find its level there, and it was going to end up being bad. You knew it. As long as Michigan didn't just like turn the ball over a million times.
Starting to feel really bad about like when we did our preseason quarterback rankings for the Big Ten, and I think I put DeVito at like 12.
Yeah, he's been really good.
I mean, he's got to have. I mean, obviously, their running back Cam Brown's been Really good.
Yeah, Brown's a beast, but DeVito's been solid.
Yeah. He's played like Cade McNamara, basically, just managed the game.
Yeah, you could probably. I think you had Petrus a little bit higher than.
I did. Oh no.
He
We're not
might
talking
be.
about that. I think I had Petrus at like 4 or 5.
He might be last. Maybe not.
Yeah. Eric, maybe Simon. Evan
Oh
Simon.
yeah. Whoever is in for Rutgers is last. It's not
Johnny Lang, and even if he's a tight end,
they're all last. That trio that they throw out there is last.
Isn't Artur Sikowski? Isn't he the backup now to DeVito?
Yeah.
He transferred from Rutgers, right?
So, yeah, he's bad. Yeah. In that game that he had to play, they won, but he at one point was like 10 for 15 for like 11 yards.
I'm trying to remember.
I didn't know that was possible.
I was trying to remember who like he reminded me of because gosh, I'll find it in a second. Who was it? Was it maybe Alex Hornibrook? Is that what he reminds me of? Like Wisconsin's quarterback?
Stunt guy. He never threw the ball beyond the line of scrimmage.
Richard Legal.
Yeah, never throws the ball beyond the line of scrimmage, and it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's funny because I went through all the starting quarterbacks for every Big Ten team since like 1980, and it was just like some of the names that like the nostalgia hit me. Like I remember when Danny O'Brien played for. I think he was also who else did he play? He played for Maryland and he played for Wisconsin.
And Wisconsin, I think. Yeah, played for both. I'm not sure Maryland was in the Big Ten yet, though. They might have been, but.
And then obviously remember Ben Chappell for Indiana, and then Cameron Kaufman, just Kane Coulter for Northwestern. Those were the days.
Yep. They tried to get like a quasi Heisman campaign for him and Dan Persa going.
Oh, Dan Persa.
I'm like, no.
That was right after Mike Kafka, so they thought they really had a good one.
Yeah, I'm like, no. Mike Kafka is a good offensive coordinator, though.
He is, yeah. And he was a good quarterback when he was there with Northwestern, but Caleb Turbush. Remember Caleb Turbush for Purdue?
I do.
Ron Kellogg III from Nebraska.
Remember that? He had a big arm. He was pretty bad, but he had a big arm.
And then the Tyler O'Connor years at Michigan State. That was probably one of the worst.
There's been some bad ones throughout the whole. I mean, Michigan is no slouch on bad ones either. But
we had like the 3 Sheridan wagon run of quarterbacks, basically. Jeff George Jr. at Illinois. That was fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jeff George Jr. eventually transferred to Michigan for a year, I think.
Did he?
Never played.
I was going to say he did not. He was right after Wes Lunt and Chase Crouch.
Yep.
Oh.
Some good times. Good times in the Big Ten.
Minnesota had Marquise Gray, and he's a tight end. He was a tight end in the NFL for a minute.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was fun to just go through the nostalgia on all of that. I mean, Chris Laviano, Gary Nova.
Gary Nova beat Michigan.
He did. I know that. And Mike Teal, Tom Savage. It's interesting. I thought Rutgers might have had like a run of quarterbacks. It was like, wow, they might have had a run that was better than some of these other teams. I mean, they had, Ray Lucas back in the day, Mike McMahon, Tom Savage. Yeah. So they had quarterbacks at least that went to the NFL.
Mm-hmm. I mean, some of these teams never had any going. I mean, Rutgers was for a minute there, especially in the Big East at times. Like they were cooking pretty good. Like they were moving the first run with Shiano. Like they were rolling along pretty good. They had figured some things out. They had Ray Rice, and they had some dudes that played for them for a while, and then Shiano left. Then they went to the Big Ten, which in hindsight for them was probably a mistake. And it just hasn't. They haven't been able. And then they had like some weird. The athletic director did weird things and like got fired, and they had probation and they had a bunch of other problems. But yeah. I
was looking at Minnesota, and they're one I'm looking at where it's like, okay, you had no NFL quarterback like since Corey Sauter, and that was like 97, and then Yeah, they had Cupido maybe got a tryout. Adam Weber was right after him, and he might have gotten a tryout.
He played as a freshman. He was actually, they thought he was going to be really, really good.
And obviously I mentioned Marquise Gray, who made it to the NFL, but as a tight end. And then Philip Nelson went to the AAF. Yep. After that, Mitch Leidner was after him, but Leidner didn't play more than a year in the NFL.
No.
So then you had Demery Croft, Connor Rhoda, Zach Annexstad, and then you have Tanner Morgan.
Tanner Morgan's been there for about 25 years. So
yeah,
also, if we're talking about the Big Ten in general, he was horrible on Saturday. He was like 4 for 16 for like 26 yards.
And Minnesota was one of those teams where it's like maybe they could win the West, you know? So
yeah, I'm getting off on them. They're not. I'm getting off that train. I think Purdue is the team still. I really do.
Yeah, I don't.
It's going to come down to
Illinois. They're the West or the East?
Yeah, so it's going to come down to Purdue and Illinois. And
yeah,
they play together, I think, in a week or two, and I think if everything falls right in this week, I think that is for the West Championship already. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.